Welcome all my joyful friends to Once Upon a Storybook. Welcome all my joyful friends to Once Upon a Storybook. My name is Cynthia with Cynthia's Joyful Creations, and we are looking at real life true stories of angels from the book In the Arms of Angels. I do not take any credit for these stories. I am just simply sharing them. Today's story is entitled, What Can the Children See? Babies and small children, and the purest of spirits in our world, the mentally challenged, seem able to cross the boundaries between heaven and earth in a way that adults cannot. Who among us has not noticed a baby staring fixedly at an object that we don't see, and then breaking into wriggling coos and giggles as if in recognition? What about imaginary friends, the beings that inhabit preschoolers' lives? Are all of them just pretend? Recently, a child who has Down syndrome spoke happily of the yellow man who came to his room at night and played with him. His family was perplexed. They showed him pictures in magazines, hoping to clarify his comments. Eventually, the child saw a drawing of an angel. "The yellow man," he cried in delight. And the family understood. This boy had no words for shiny or golden, so he chose the closest description his limited vocabulary could manage. On another occasion, two young children were riding in a car behind the one driven by their grandparents. Everyone in the second vehicle saw the grandparents' car suddenly skid off the road and tumble down a ravine. Surely both should have lost their lives in the accident. Instead, each walked away with a few scratches. Days later, when the adults told someone of the episode in front of the children, both youngsters were adamant that something had been left out. One of the children said, "You forgot to tell about the big birds that flew over Grandpa's car." The other child agreed, and those birds went down in that hole with them too. None of the adults had observed anything out of the ordinary. Small children also exhibit uncanny awareness now and then about things the adults in their lives have not taught them. Sometimes this knowledge can be painful, at least at first. Kathleen Trenner knows this well. One afternoon on the way to soccer practice, her 4-year-old daughter Ashley suddenly posed a question. "Mommy, would you be sad if I died?" "Oh, yes, honey," Kathleen answered, surprised. "It would break my heart. I would miss you so much." "But, Mommy," the little girl persisted, "I'd be in heaven with Jesus. I'd be an angel." "I know that, but I wouldn't be able to hug you. Besides, you're already my little angel." Kathleen was becoming a bit nervous. Ashley had never expressed these thoughts before. 2 days later, Ashley and her grandparents died in the bombing of the Alfred P. Murray Federal Building in Oklahoma City. The adults had had an appointment at the Social Security office there and had taken Ashley along. For a long time, Kathleen was unable to get past the horror and grief of the event. It was much later before she began to see that during that conversation in the car, mother and daughter had changed places. Ashley, from a hidden wellspring of spiritual knowledge, had been reassuring Kathleen, bringing her a final gift of comfort. "My daughter had gone to heaven, and no matter how hard I chased her, it wasn't time for me to go. I knew she was there, and I would see her again. She had told me so." Not all children brushes with heaven end in tragedy. The majority seem amazing and awe-inspiring. For example, Lynette Coldabella of Palatine, Illinois, is a very busy wife and mother who also runs her own business. When Lynette's 85-year-old grandfather, Grundy Hupp, developed Alzheimer's disease, Lynette made time to help her mother with his care. Grundy had been a gruff, independent type, preferring life in a rural cabin in Lincoln, Illinois, to life in the Chicago area. He and Lynette had always been close. "When I was a child, I would go and stay with him almost every weekend," Lynette says. I loved to listen to his stories of the old days. Grundy was delighted when Lynette's 3 daughters, Larissa, Tina, and Angelina, came along. It pained Lynette to see her grandfather deteriorating. He gave up the cabin and moved into Lynette's mother's house. Eventually, the women realized that it was time to move Grundy into a nursing home. We found a wonderful facility in our area, but soon he stopped speaking. Grundy faded into a coma, and it was difficult to know whether he sensed their presence anymore. During Grundy's final days, Lynette and her mother took shifts so that someone would be with him at all times. Relatives from out of town came and went. Everyone knew they were saying goodbye to Grundy. One October evening, Lynette arrived at the nursing home at about 11 o'clock at night. Her grandfather lay with his eyes closed as always, so she sat on a chair at his bedside and became engrossed in the book she had brought along to help pass the time. At around midnight, a nurse came in to check an IV. Suddenly, Grundy's eyes flew open, and he looked directly at Lynette. "I have to go now," he told her, almost urgently. "I have to be someone's guardian angel." Lynette was astonished. Her grandfather seemed completely lucid, just as he had been before the onset of his illness. Before she could respond, he squeezed her hand and died. The nurse witnessed it all. "Sometimes at the very end, they seem to be looking into heaven," she told Lynette, "but I've never heard anyone say that." It was an odd comment. People do not turn into angels when they die, although Scripture says we will become like angels, which no doubt refers to our new lives as spirit beings. Instead, souls entering heaven are called saints or members of the elect. But Lynette did not know anything about angels and had never discussed them or even thought about them. She was sure that her grandfather, who was a good man, not at all religious or church-going, didn't know anything about angels either. Why would this strange remark be on his lips as he left life? Lynette did not have time to ponder. Things had to be done now, people notified, arrangements made, and all while she was grieving, she would think about it later. The next morning, Lynette's husband, Mark, talked her into attending her bowling team's championship competition. The funeral was being delayed until out-of-towners could arrive, and there was nothing she could do until then. The outing would do her good. Lynette agreed and phoned her younger sister to come by and babysit. Some relatives, along with my older daughter, Larissa, were in the dining room, and the phone was ringing. And I was blow-drying my hair. In the confusion in her large 3-story house, Lynette realized she had lost track of Angelina, her 3-year-old. Angie was probably playing in her bedroom, but Lynette went to check anyway. Suddenly, Lynette heard screams from the dining room below. "Angelina! Oh, no!" "Mommy, Mommy!" Larissa was running up the stairs. "Angie just fell out of her bedroom window." "My goodness, Lynette!" and Mark tore out of their room and down the stairs. "I saw some purple fly by the dining room window." "Mommy," Larissa was crying. In a moment of frenzy, Lynette thought, Angie was wearing red and blue, and that makes purple. Lynette couldn't bring herself to go out the door to the stone patio below Angie's bedroom. She was too terrified of what she would find. Instead, as Mark sped by, she grabbed the phone and dialed 411. It was a mistake, but the information operator sent the paramedics anyway. I kept screaming for people not to pick her up, and then I ran and put a blanket over her so she wouldn't go into shock. Angie was lying very still, but as rescue vehicles screeched into the driveway, she began to cough. Paramedics bundled her onto a stretcher, and Lynette jumped into the ambulance. Mark would follow in his car, but he already sensed that the prognosis was grim. He had seen one of the paramedics look up at the broken screen dangling some 35 feet above, gaze at the unconscious child, and simply shake his head. In the ambulance, Angie tried to speak, but her words were garbled. By the time the ambulance arrived at Northwest Community Hospital in nearby Arlington Heights, at least 8 physicians had been notified and were assembling. Angie would have massive internal injuries, they assumed, because she had fallen on the rocks and gravel being used to rebuild the patio. They also expected her to have head and spinal trauma and various broken bones, depending on how she had landed. Grimly, the doctors began their examinations. They told us that they didn't know how long she would be conscious, so they let both of us stay with her, which was unusual. Lynette watched the emergency room scene in disbelief. First Grandpa, now Angie. It seemed too much to bear. How could such a thing have happened? Who would have expected a sturdy window screen to suddenly give way? I was terrified that Angie was going to die. I cried, but I also tried to pay attention to what the doctors were doing. There would be plenty of time to weep later. As she watched, she noticed that Angie was again mumbling, trying to say something. "Wings," the 3-year-old murmured. "Pretty wings." A few moments later, she seemed to notice one of the physicians. "Where are the wings?" she asked. The physicians seemed nonchalant at the question, as if they heard it often. But one of them looked up and told Lynette and Mark to step out of the room. Doctors have discovered that sometimes children talk more freely about what happened to them if parents are not in the room. Eventually, a physician came out and approached them. "Are you sure she hit stones? Because there should be gravel embedded in her skin and scrapes in different places. But she has no marks on her." Lynette was astonished. "No marks?" "Nothing, but some redness on her upper arms. I'm not sure what that's from." "You mean she's going to be okay?" It didn't make sense. "Now don't get your hopes up yet," the doctor was being cautious. But Lynette hurried back into the examining room. It was true. Angie looked remarkably healthy and alert. "Angie, did you hit your head on the ground?" "No," Angie answered. "I fell out the screen and I saw Papa Hupp, and he said it wasn't time. He had beautiful wings, Mommy." "Wasn't time? What was Angie talking about?" Lynette persisted. "But did you fall on the patio?" "No," the 3-year-old said again. "Papa Hupp caught me. On my arm, see?" She lifted her little arms and Lynette looked. There were no bruises, no scrapes, cuts, or embedded gravel anywhere. Just a few red marks above her elbows, exactly where a rescuer might grab a falling child. "I have to be someone's guardian angel," her grandfather had said. His assignment had been real. Angie stayed in the hospital for 3 days as every inch of her was tested and found to be perfectly normal. She would arrive home on Halloween, go trick-or-treating, dressed as an angel, and amaze all the neighbors who had watched and prayed as the ambulance pulled out of the driveway. The doctor's consensus was that she sustained no injuries from her fall. How this could have happened was left unsaid. Saints and scientists do not often meet. However, as Lynette prepared to take Angie home, one of the emergency room physicians came to the room and asked to speak with her. It wasn't medical advice that he wanted to share. "I suggest that when you get home, you put Angie back in her bedroom and watch to see if she tries to get out the window again." Lynette was shocked. She had been planning to move Angie into another bedroom, far from the memories of that window. "Why should we do that, Doctor?" "When little children see angels, sometimes they want to repeat the experience. They're too young to know that it might be dangerous. So you think she might deliberately just see if she's afraid of going near the window. That will be a good sign." Angie was afraid of the window, and because of all the safety precautions the Cold-Bellas took, she never again put herself in danger. However, for the next few years, she often drew pictures of a figure with silvery wings. "It was a beautiful angel, Mom, but he had the old Papa Hupp face on him." Now, as with many childhood experiences, her memories are fading. Lynette sees a miracle each time she looks at her daughter. "I never used to believe in angels, but now I do. I don't think a 3-year-old would have been so preoccupied with them after falling out of a window unless it was true. How it all happened is something that she'll leave to God and to one of God's special helpers, Grandpa Hupp." Well, I hope you've enjoyed this angel story, and thank you for joining me for Once Upon a Storybook. And I look forward to next week as we look at yet another angel story. Until then, be joyful, stay crafty in your own way, and make your own joyful creations. Bye, everyone.